Welcome to the African Center for Community and Development, and today is International Rural Women's Day, and we think that's a very important aspect of our well-being on earth, which is the empowerment of rural women. The theme for this year is Rural Women Cultivating Good Food for All, and it is very important as they contribute a lot in terms of the food we have. They are also responsible for most of the food in city centers, as cities depend on rural areas for food. In Africa, more than 50% of the population are rural women, and we are very concerned about how their well-being should be in the postmodern Africa, where globally and in terms of international context, 1.3 billion tons of food is wasted annually, and this is very important as 811 million people are hungry annually globally. So we think today, from the African Center for Community and Development, it is a very reflective note. And our way of reflecting is to be able to suggest some of the things that are important in terms of empowering rural women. Many rural women are facing issues like technological gaps or access to veritable education or even healthcare. There has to be a readjustment of policies to focus on rural areas in order that women should have the necessary education to be able to empower themselves to start businesses or to support or sustain their livelihoods. This means vocational education or vocational training is invaluable, and therefore NGOs and civil society organizations or even public and private partnerships need to be established and supported in order to arrive at such a supportive mechanism for the empowerment of rural women. At the African Center for Community and Development, we are actually documenting our tested practices in order that women across the globe, and rural women in particular, can be able to replicate from our tested realities and practices in order to start up their businesses and also to sustain them. We are doing this via our various agri-business and agricultural activities, and also through the knowledge we have gained here and through our collaborative agenda with rural and community development organizations in Cameroon and across Africa. We think that this approach is very important in the fight against poverty, as a lot of people who suffer poverty is based on vertical and horizontal inequalities in communities and the prioritization of education for the boy child against rural and even urban women, with other factors like cultural discrimination as well as some sexual malpractices, including issues like genital mutilation and other aspects. We think that rural women need to be empowered and more people need to be sensitized to be able to carry out more equality and effective, equitable practices to sustain the lives of women across Africa and the globe. So, rabbit farming, poultry farming, quail farming, pig farming, a host of other livelihoods, even the documentation and the development of inventories on biodiversity in the tropical rainforests and forested areas of Africa and the globe are important in triangulating data and establishing more effective policies towards the empowerment of rural women. Sub-Saharan Africa has the majority of poor women and even rural women in the globe. Actually, the number of girls living in very poor households in Sub-Saharan Africa is expected to grow from 249 million people to 283 million between 2021 and 2030. We are hoping that more strategic partnerships and also more targeted funding should be put in place to ensure that women can receive necessary funding mechanisms, and that organizations that are working to empower people and women in particular will be supported. Because as of now, and following a lot of research in Africa, many of these organizations are not sponsored, and the criteria used in sponsoring them is sometimes not taking into consideration local realities, hence leading to project failures and also the empowerment of the wrong segments of society or even wastage. Guinea fowl farming is something that rural women can adopt. The species lay a lot of eggs, as we have noticed at the African Center for Community and Development. In the continent where 1 out of 3 infants under 5 is stunted, and where close to 30% of the population is malnourished, and where women do not have access to loans, education, and even jobs, it is very important that these livelihoods options can be adapted or adopted by women in order to empower them. Other livelihoods options that can work for women, as we have seen, include the transformation of bamboo, which is actually a tool or a resource that has been tested in over 2,000 products globally. We actually think that bamboo can be an option towards the creation of green jobs for women. So, as you see here, plantain farming is also something that we encourage based on our practices at the African Center for Community and Development. It's going to increase, will diversify the incomes of women and other marginal communities affected especially by so many factors, including climate change and conflicts in Africa. It is worth noting that in 2019 there were 19,600 armed conflicts recorded in Africa, and most of these conflicts were affecting youths and women who are vulnerable and are exposed to the weaknesses and poor decisions of policymakers across the continent. So we have the infrastructure and the experiences with women at the African Center for Community and Development and across the population based on our capacity to mobilize social capital and also to work with different stakeholders across the continent and in Cameroon in order to empower these subpopulations as well as to empower women and rural women in livelihoods options. We are willing to work with international stakeholders to host them, to be able to train rural women in Cameroon and Africa, and also to create necessary partnerships that can help in sharing our tested practices to rural women in the continent and across the globe in order to realize an effective implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals in Cameroon and Africa. Work with us at the African Center for Community and Development. This has been Arrey Ivo. Happy International Rural Women's Day. Thanks. Cheers.